and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to The Future is Female. This is the show where we find the extraordinary in every woman. Now, in this episode, we're shining a spotlight on financial literacy for women, which is an essential yet often overlooked part of empowerment. So I'm delighted to introduce my guest today, financial planner and financial literacy provider Aisya Rahman. She's the founder of Aisya Rahman Advisory, which runs financial literacy workshops exclusively for professional women, for women entrepreneurs and stay-at-home mums. So welcome to the show. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Melisa.
All right, so talk to me a little bit about yourself and maybe your journey, because I'm curious to know how you came into this line and specifically became so passionate about building financial literacy in women and empowering them in their own financial journeys.
So because I'm such a fan of yours since BFM days, I think there's such a big gap, Melisa. I'm sure you agree that there is, when it comes to financial planning per se, it's very male-led and it's like it's gender neutral. And I come from the industry as well, from banking and then from unit trust, insurance, estate planning, and then now financial planning. It's such an alien world for women out there. It's not alien for you and I because we come from that background, but generally speaking, for women who are working, the employees, the stay-at-home moms, it's like, what is financial planning? Because the industry is very much skewed towards selling products rather than education-based. Yeah. So my story is I am the fourth educator in my lineage. So my great-grandparents, my grandmother, and then my mom, and then I, also an educator, but it was never an intention to be an educator. Fate has it that my husband fell into bankruptcy 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, and because of that story, right, and I was in the banking space at that time. Can you imagine going to work every day, not being able to tell your colleagues, hey, my husband's going through bankruptcy, because you're supposed to be literate because you're a banker, right? But no, you can never associate being a banker and becoming financially literate. These are two separate worlds and responsibilities altogether. And because of that story, I quit the banking and then I became an agent for unit trust, for insurance, for estate planning, and there was still a gap because we were shoving down products down to consumers' throats, and I didn't like it myself. And that's how I found out about financial planning. And even so, financial planning, okay, there's an extra role, which is advisory. And I began to meet women who are going through divorce, who just lost their husband due to death, COVID, and women who's going through bankruptcy. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's not a platform for these women to come and just talk. Because how can you shove unit trust or stocks and ETF and whatnot, right, when someone's going through divorce or bankruptcy? They just need a helping hand. So that's how fate had it that maybe this is my path. So it's like a flow, you know, like a river that is flowing. Finally, alhamdulillah, in 2021, during COVID, right, in 2021, I had a meltdown. I was going through depression and anxiety because the uncertainty of COVID was also a reflection of the uncertainty of my income. We're not paid basic salaries, we're on commission based, right? And during that time, I remembered I wanted to give up. But then somehow rather, because of my story of wanting to get out of riba, and as a Muslim, we have to get out of riba, and financial planning space, financial industry, it's very, I wouldn't say riba driven, but it's just led by conventional products more so than Islamic products. So at that point of time, I'm like, how do I not shove down products to my consumers or clients, but rather just be the kind of person that they would fall back to and just talk about strategies or education or just life in general, because everything in life, right, needs money, kan? But money is not everything, so where is that space? So we are that space.
So you found, you recognize a gap, and I love when you said that most kind of financial education or even financial products are designed to be gender neutral when it ought to be gender sensitive.
Exactly.
Because there are such gendered dimensions to financial vulnerability, which you touched upon. I want to talk a little bit about that. When in your line of work, how does gender come into play, particularly when you think about a woman's financial vulnerability? We are financially more at risk when unplanned life events happen to us. What's been your observations about this?
So number one, I think in the global context, gender pay gap is such a big thing.
Of course.
I'm sure it is too for you and for me as well. That being said, number one. And number two, when we are paid less, but based on statistics, we are living longer, how do we quantify and compensate that extra milestone in life, right, with lesser pay? It just doesn't make sense. And how things are in the market, like we are supposed to approach products to invest, right, to meet that extra milestone in life, but then you're not making it accessible to women to first understand the products, the risks and the rewards, and what more to lead these women to then make that investment decision, informed decision, to finally make that first investment decision.
Yeah.
Generally, women are scared when it comes to investing, am I right? All they are used to are typical cliche banking products. Am I allowed to mention words?
Yes, of course.
So for example, women are generally exposed to typical banking products such as ASB, or even worse, ASB financing. You are reversing the literacy instead of forwarding the literacy. So vulnerabilities also in the sense where when the products are not speaking to women, women don't make that decision to invest, and knowing that we are paid less and we live longer, something just doesn't make sense and add up.
Right. Well, when you think about how the financial literacy gap, beyond just the products being designed for men or not being designed specifically for women, if I may, how do we think about that? I mean, what is allowing this gap to persist? Is the onus on us as women to learn more, because we don't place the same onus on men? You know, we don't say, "Oh, men, you've got to get financial literate." We just kind of assume men are more financial literate than women. Is that really the case? Are men more financial literate than women? And how did we get here?
Because hence the show is The Future is Female, so I can't really comment on the opposite gender, but generally speaking, based on the events that we attend in the financial services industry, these are all led by men. Right, the speakers are men, the product designs are made by men, so they assume that women have the same risk tolerance or the same level of understanding, number one. Number two, the assumption is men are more financially literate. I beg to differ. I mean, taking my husband as an example, right, how did we get into bankruptcy, right, if he's supposed to be the financially literate one? But on the assumption that you made, whereby we're supposed to be financially literate, there is an assumption in the female space where the higher you climb in your life, in the corporate space,
like a more professional,
more C-suite position, you're supposed to be financially literate. And I beg to differ. Because we serve a lot of high-ranking corporate women, and they are not financially literate, and that's such a big gap, Melisa.
Okay, so I know that you provide a Women in Wealth workshop, which I find quite fascinating because it's tailored also for professional women. So with this assumption that professional women automatically would have their finances in order, you provide this space for women to come. Tell me more about the Women in Wealth Workshop.
So Women in Wealth Workshop is a 6-month mentoring program. Inshallah, it'll be 1 year soon. Right, we're going to stretch it to 1 year because of the findings that we've seen. We've been running Women in Wealth for the last 2 years. This year, it's our 2-year mark. And what I've seen is that women are generally very passionate about money if you give them a safe space to talk about money without selling them products. Because you have to understand, Melisa, just like you, imagine someone, a salesperson comes up to you, the first thing that you do is guts up, and you're like, I'm already literate, what can you offer me? So same thing with these women, they are already literate in their own ways, it's just that there are gaps, bits and pieces there. How do we then meet them at where they are and then guide them, and then look, at the end of the day, at the end of this mentoring program, you can invest on your own. You know what kind of insurance and takaful to buy that fits you and your risk profile and your dependence here to the hereafter.
What does a mentoring program entail?
So our 6-month mentoring program would talk about all things financial literacy, from preparing you for divorce, preparing you for a career break, for motherhood, for bankruptcy, because we've had a student who's going through bankruptcy, and that's quite different than the rest of our students, but we do have cases where people are trying to get out of debt. So what kind of products do you give them? Nothing, right? You're trying to get out of debt. So it's a strategy and it's a handhold mentoring where we tell you, okay, certain things in your expenses or cash flow, this is what you have to scale back, and there are certain parts in your income. This is an opportunity here that I see, experience that. So we've had students where they move and shifted jobs through our mentoring programs. So they may think that they're coming into Women and Wealth for financial literacy, but we give them more. The 3 things that I uphold in Women and Wealth is spiritual, emotional, and financial. So trying to bridge basically financial and psychology and spiritual together all in one, inshallah.
Do you find that it's more beneficial when women are doing this collectively as opposed to individually?
Yes, because from the financial planning space, it's very individualism.
It is. It's
right.
one
You
on
and
one,
me,
yeah.
right? You and me, and I'm not allowed to share about what happens with another client because it's PNC, right? But when you put together powerful women or people who make impact in the industry, put them in a safe space, confined space, and we talk all things. We open up about our marriage, our past, our childhood. Powerful things happen when women feel safe, right? Defense are down, and finally they can achieve at the end of the day clarity. And when you have clarity, I don't need to push you at all to invest, to buy and have the right insurance or takaful coverage, to plan for your departure. And then ultimately, as a woman, for mothers especially, when you are financially empowered, what happens next? As a mother, you naturally then pass the knowledge to your babies, right? To your kids. So that's what I'm passionate about, and that's what we create. Our tagline is basically empowering you with financial literacy and getting out of riba here to the hereafter.
So what have been some of the more common challenges? So in this group of women who are sharing their kind of life story and life challenges, what have been your observations as to trends within how women find themselves in financial difficulty and how they find themselves wanting to break out of it? Because as much as you need to kind of acknowledge the problem and then seek for the path out. So what have you observed? What are some of the common threads? And I'm asking because maybe we're watching tonight and we're thinking maybe this could be, I find myself in the same situation, maybe I might be wanting to seek a path out as well.
So I have a case study that I want to share. This lady is about to prepare for retirement. She's already in her 50s, and she's so scared to be approached by bankers or agents or even financial planners like me. It's not that she can't afford it, she can, but she has always wanted to learn how to invest on her own because she knows that, hey, I'm a single mom, I got to prepare for retirement. Retirement is real, and I'm going to outlive my kids, or maybe outlive anybody else up till 80. So there was a gap, right? The gap was, how do I find more income? The fact that I'm in my 50s. And it's not about finding more income, but rather looking at all that you have and say, okay, look, which one goes to the future? And put that aside till it compounds and achieve whatever target. And then what do I do now with the balance to prepare me for my immediate retirement? So there is this fear of, when we mention retirement, it's like, oh, you're supposed to know how to retire at 55 and then welcome, that bundle of EPF. Not that much anyway, right? So that assumption and that fear of retirement is real, one thing, regardless of age. But the more closer you are to 55, the fear is even more real, because you finally realize, these women finally realize that I'm not prepared. What do I do with my EPF money? What happens when I no longer have my employer's medical benefits for me and my kids, right? So after acquiring the right knowledge, the recent result that I've just been told was this particular student of mine finally invested for the very first time in her life at the age of 50s, 6-figure investments on her own without the assistance of financial planners like me, agents or bankers. And can you feel how liberating that is for the first time and go 6 figures?
But I love that it's never too late. You're never too old to be able to equip yourself with knowledge and trust yourself to be able to make those decisions.
Yeah, trust. Women don't trust themselves, right? We're naturally very insecure.
Okay, so I also want to talk about money in relationships, because many women find themselves in relationships or marriages where there's not great communication about money. It's a difficult topic. You know, you're two individuals coming together, and money is often taboo. You often leave it to one partner to manage kind of the financial expenses. How do you think that through when you talk to your students? The importance of open communication about finances in a relationship, but also how do you do that? How do you begin to have those types of conversations?
So I'm quite a storyteller because only through stories and women can relate. Hey, I'm like that too, right? So my story was my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandfather married 2 wives, and we come from the first wife's lineage. And I saw how she was abandoned in a way, financially and in a lot of ways. And those days, remember our grandmother's era, you can't tell family or friends or neighbors about what you're going through because like...
You hide the hardships.
You just can't. It's just how it is those days. And then when it came to my mom, she filed for a divorce with my dad when I was very young. And from that, I saw the hardship of a single mother trying to raise 4 kids. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Right, 4 kids on her own without any financial help because she didn't qualify for zakat or whatever. You know, certain kind of women, when you fall under T20 or M40, can you qualify for zakat?
No,
you can't.
Yeah.
But she had 4 kids. I think, in a way, I mean, just give her a break, right? But 2 generations of financial hardship. And then my story was my husband fell into bankruptcy, and it's like 3 generations of financial pain. So I had to pause myself and ask myself, is it you and me against the world, just like how mom and grandma was? Or you and me against the world is like this, right? Or you and me against each other. And we really needed 3 years to really consolidate, engage therapists, you know, life coach, to just really align our goals and ourselves. Okay, I think it's time, it's done. We've been going against each other, it doesn't solve anything. So it's you and me against the world. So for couples out there, open communication takes time. Okay. But yes, it is a necessity, but it takes time.
Oh, particularly if they have different financial
upbringing,
habits, exposure, risk, you know, how they approach risk. Some people may think high risk, high return.
Yeah.
What do you advise your students, your clients, about how to manage finances jointly while still maintaining a certain level of financial autonomy and empowerment?
I'm a bit biased because my worst case scenario is he can die, our spouse can die, disable, or worst case scenario, divorce. Right? So financially, I encourage all women to have their own financial accounts, financial investments under your own names. Regardless if you're a stay-at-home mom, your nafkah can come in and then you channel it into your own portfolio, separate from him.
So you recommend women have their own individual
portfolio.
Oh, portfolios.
Yeah,
okay.
portfolios and account. So nafkah comes in, you channel it into your own savings, not joint savings, right? Your own investments, and everything is on your own. And then you have another bucket where you can then have a joint of everything. But you must have that separation.
Is that typical, Aisya?
It's not typical. It's not typical. Everybody somehow joins everything together. Right. It's like you and me forever.
You think for convenience sake it would be the best way, but often you lose sight of, you know, I mean,
the possibilities.
Unplanned life events will happen. So I also wanted to ask you how you view, in your experience in the financial world, the access women have to financial services and resources. So it's one thing being kind of pushed products, right, that are not designed for you in the first place. But do women know where to go to seek help for particular predicaments that they may find themselves in? Are access to these services equal?
Well, I come from the banking space, and I must say that the banking space is not equal. You would get better treatment and advisory if you fall under the premium segment, the high net worth or ultra high net worth. But imagine someone mass, right? Someone B40 or lower M40 tier going into the banking space. What would be the first thing that they get? What do you want to do today? All right, and then they see your accounts and then they say, oh, I think because of this, you don't qualify for credit cards or you qualify for certain type of financing. But we don't need that. Why do we have to approach someone by selling them something? Why can't we be utterly, you know, curious about the person's well-being? But it is what it is, right, Melisa? Hence why we built Women and Wealth, because banking is banking lah.
Okay, so can institutions and society in general change to make it more equitable for women? We see the power that it brings to women when they are financially equipped, right, with literacy. So what would you like to see, Aisya, change in terms of the way society is structured, the banking landscape is structured, so that it becomes more equitable and more accessible to women?
I think it takes time and also it requires collaboration. Banking or insurance or unit trust, whatever, at the end of the day, they are a business. And a business objective is to make profits and revenue first. You've got capex and people to pay for, right? So for them to be interested in someone's well-being, I think, why don't you leverage on people who are focusing on that space? Maybe people like us, for example. Because I do see, I mean, we've spoken to banks about all these. We've been engaged by banks to talk about financial literacy often. Yeah, this year alone, we've had so many gigs with banks, alhamdulillah. But it's just a touch and go thing. Like a 1 hour talk. How can you empower someone through a 1 hour talk?
It's got to be more consistent and
more consistent, more personalized, more private, so then you hear the real problems and then you help them, because once you help them, they have clarity. Trust me, they will come after you. You don't have to do anything. Psychology, right? At the end of the day.
So it being private and intimate and a safe space, that is what you were hoping to achieve with
in Women and Wealth Workshop. Okay. It's we're the underdog. I really sold everything that I had. My bags, my car, my house. I maxed out both my cards the last 3 years. We're on our 4th year right now, alhamdulillah. But you know, bootstrapping for 3 years, it's really not for the faint-hearted. And I'm just glad that my intention had always been because of my mom's pain and grandmother's pain and then mine. And then just putting that into context and like amplifying. I think there are more women who's just like the women in my lineage. Why don't we try and see if we were to help them, what happens? And we've had to date 100 students, almost 100 students. And I'm not about quantity, I'm all about quality, right? And what happens when we equip and empower these 100 women? Good things take place. More families are saved. More single moms are saved. You know, more kids are financially educated, inshallah, just in the matter of time.
Well, hopefully what you're doing is helping other families break their generational financial pain.
Yeah, and trauma.
In the few minutes that we have left, I want to ask you, Aisya, what advice do you have? You know, I'm sure there are many watching out there, men and women, but especially women who may feel overwhelmed, who may feel unsure of how they can take control of their financial future, especially women who are of a certain age and think, oh, it's too late for me. I've spent my life caring for other people. Now it's time for me to look at my future and I'm worried. How can they take control and start building a more solid financial foundation? Okay.
First, let's take charge. You know, when you were about to take off in the airplane, what happens? You put on the oxygen mask on yourself first, right?
Put it on yourself first.
So that's the first thing that I would always explain in Women and Wealth. I said, it's time to be selfish and there's nothing wrong. This is the space for you to be selfish. I allow you. In fact, I encourage you to be selfish, right? And secondly, know that overwhelming, anxiety, shame, these are normal emotions in finance. And if you are going to play that self-pity game, that victimized mindset, okay, sure, go ahead. But until when? There has to be a deadline. So maybe you play the violin for the next 1 year, sure. Once you're ready to really get back up, right, to fall into the best game that you can for the rest of 2024, I urge you to tell yourself, look, I don't know what I don't know. There is a gap, but I'm going to do something about that gap. And the gap will be filled, inshallah, through Women and Wealth Workshop. So I want to invite all you women out there to come to our largest women-only financial literacy seminar on 7 September. It's a full-day affair at Shah Alam Convention Centre. Our tickets are available at womenwealthworkshop.com.my.
Thank you so much, Aisya, for being on the show today. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
That's all we have for you on this episode of The Future is Female. I'm Melisa Idris signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching and good night.